There are more takeaways from the combine than just the stars. We're going to get into that with Rob Rank tonight, as well as the fallout from the monstrous trade for the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. What does this mean for their draft plans? We're doing it all right here today on Locked On NFL Draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of the Locked On NFL Draft Show. I'm your host, former NFL and NFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. And of course, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan Tracy. And y'all know, every Thursday episode, we got our guy, Rob Rang, with us. And we're getting into some good stuff, starting with the Combine. All right, and this probably will be the last Combine podcast that we have. We're touching on that. It won't be. All right, Ryan says it won't be. But we haven't gotten Rob's perspective. So, Rob, we've been talking about, we talked about it. We talked about with John Harris on the previous episode. But now we get your take. Just the floor is yours.
I certainly appreciate that, guys. And with all due respect to John Harris, I mean, I've had a lot of opportunities to go to Indianapolis and sit inside of Lucas Oil Stadium, and there are some really interesting things I think that happened in Indianapolis this past weekend. I think for one, let's just acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of guys who have extraordinary straight line speed. I don't care who has the stopwatch. There were guys who can absolutely flat run. I don't know if they can change direction quite as well as some of the other draft classes that we've seen in the past. But to me, that was one of the things that we absolutely have to talk about. I mean, whether they're wide receivers, whether they're 340-pound nose guards, there was straight line speed to be had. And so I think that is one of the real storylines here. But I can tell you this, having sat inside that stadium and watched quarterback after quarterback after quarterback really throw the ball very well, I've learned that I don't have to watch quarterback throw the ball really well because it doesn't really matter. You're throwing against air. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of people here who are going to hype up these quarterbacks in this draft class that maybe shouldn't be. And then finally, one other position I really want to kind of highlight. I think that what we just saw at the Combine really kind of showed that this class is special at a couple of different positions. Edge rushers, oh my goodness, a lot of really talented players. Cornerbacks and wide receivers being two of those positions as well that truly are special. That's exactly what makes the 2022 NFL draft class a little bit special this year.
Right now, was there anything that was surprising from, just like you weren't expecting that, right? It could be good or bad. There were a couple of things where I felt like guys could improve on. Jermaine Waller, I believe he's more of a mid-round pick or was, a day 3 type guy. But he goes out there at 6 foot, 180 pounds and runs a 4.68. Matter of fact, his unofficial time was in the 4.7s. I was like, man, there's no way Waller is that slow. Another guy, Kobe Bryant out of Cincinnati, and now he has a size 6'1", 193 pounds. But, if he wanted to be like a high day 2 pick, and there are people that kind of question his straight line speed. They know he's a terrific football player. He's a Jim Thorpe Award winner. But that 40, it just does something. And he also elected to not do any of the other testing. But 4.54 official 40 time. And that's another thing where people have questions about a straight line speed, and it's not terrible. And he'll still be drafted. But I think he cost himself a little bit of money and maybe go late day 2.
Well, I mean, I think that you just mentioned 2 players right off the bat right there that make a lot of sense. I got to go up to the kind of top of the draft, and there is, a lot of people out there who are suggesting that Kyle Hamilton was going to be a top 2, top 5 selection. You're running in the 4.6s, high 4.5s on some watches. That caused some concern, especially when you have some of the other safeties who are just running crazy times. Dax Hill running the 4.3s, Lewis Cine running in the 4.3s. I mean, my goodness, there were some spectacular times at the safety positions. I think that one of the positions that kind of surprised me, we were talking before, like, is there going to be a running back who steps up? I thought that it was really impressive to see Breece Hall, especially after he called it. He said, I'm the number one running back in this draft class, and then runs in the 4.3s. And, oh, by the way, Kenneth Walker the third just actually beat him by 100th of a second. So I thought that was fascinating. But to me, one of the most intriguing things about this is the fact that there were a lot of the kind of so-called under the radar running backs that also really performed pretty well, and a couple of guys who didn't perform quite as well. Ryan, I suspect that you might have an opinion on this matter.
I have to slap myself on the hand and scold myself because I have not seen Pierre Strong run yet. That's my fault. South Dakota State, he definitely stood out. He's number 2 in the athletic matrix behind Breece Hall, who had probably the best performance of a back in a little bit. I'm not gonna compare it yet. You guys will see it when it comes out. But he and Tyler Goodson, the two that really caught me off guard, that I had seen Tyler a little bit. I didn't think he had that kind of athleticism in him. So he certainly had a way to up his performance. And now I have to go back. And unfortunately, my list this year is kind of long, guys. I have to go back and watch film again because I missed it the first time where they did something that stood out.
I think Kyra Williams, you're talking about running backs right now. That's a guy who, maybe he's not the fastest of guys, but you see just kind of, obviously the ability to be a, good running back at the next level. And he goes out there and definitely doesn't run as fast as he would like. Ryan, do you have him put in your athletic matrix yet? And if so, where is he at?
Well, let me give a caveat for everything. The matrix is a full board of all testing. And when an entire position group elects not to run any agility drills, I have a problem with that. So there is part of that. The computation is incomplete because of that. But yes, I have the basic one, and he's not going to like it because he's not in the top 20 with that run in particular. And it's not just that. It's the, 162. That 10 split, I need something more athletic out of that. That has to be more pop, especially when you're talking about 154, from Breece Hall. That is significant. 1.5 from Strong. Those are guys that show the explosion that even if you can get to the hole, you have something to bring to it and get out of there should you get caught. That's why running backs can make a difference, even if your offensive line is struggling as well. It takes that kind of athleticism. So I think I'm waiting for the agilities, but I also think some of these guys, particularly maybe both the Notre Dame guys, including Hamilton, that was a good point. Maybe both of them have a pro day that redeems them in a lot of eyes.
Right. And that was I think it was Arkansas had their pro day so close to the combine. So guys didn't even really get a chance to, work on certain things. I think a lot of people, when they look at the pro day, is like, oh, it's just hand time. And, of course, these guys are doing better. But I think what it is, a lot of times, is you get a chance to really work on the areas where you need to improve, from whatever shortcomings you had at the combine. You have more time to improve, whether it's a couple weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, a month from now. That's extra time to prepare, get stronger, get faster. And the Arkansas Razorbacks, they didn't have that chance. They had their pro day 2 day, which was 4 days, 3 days after the combine for some of these guys. So yeah, not ideal from that standpoint. And we saw Treylon Burks elected not to run the 40, but so he stood on that 4.55 time, which, not bad, but thought he would run better. But he did improve on his vertical jump, which I believe was 32 inches or 33 inches, and he jumped up to 35 inches. So I think just improving that kind of helped him from, be, or at least look a little bit more explosive. There is one guy that I want to touch on, mainly because his mom kind of got at me, but his mom tagged me and Jim Nagy in a tweet and said, listen, y'all are not showing my boy no love. He's not getting any hype. He went to the combine. He ran 4.39. Put some respect on my son's name. I said, yes, ma'am, I got you. So we're going to talk about it now. Damari Mathis out of Pittsburgh did run a 4.39. Didn't do any of the other agility drills. 5'11", 196 pounds with just shy of 32-inch arm length. So I think from a height, weight, speed standpoint, he's right there in the mix of things. And I haven't gotten to his film just yet. But I did note, and I tweeted this while we were at the Senior Bowl, there were a few reps where I thought he looked exceptional. And he wasn't one of my focus players because y'all know how it is at the Senior Bowl. If you try to watch everything and everyone, you'll end up watching nothing. So I was focused on a few guys, but in the midst of that, this kid from Pittsburgh just kept making plays, and he looked good, and he looked fluid, and he made plays on the ball. And I was like, you know what? Like this guy's not one of my focus players, but I was like, I see you. And I tweeted that out in the moment. And I got a lot of good responses from his teammates, from one of his former coaches that had really high praise of this kid. So here's someone that I definitely have to dive into the film and look more into. Shout out to his mom for calling me out on that. You know what? I was like, you know what? I think I made it, man. When mom calls you out and tags you, I was like, okay, I made it. All right, when we get back, we're going to talk about the Seattle Seahawks and Denver Broncos trades and the impact it has on the draft. For college basketball, the tournament is finally upon us. It's March Madness. And from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games, all that and more. Head over right now to the website, and you can use your mobile device or your laptop, whatever it is, but you're going to learn more about the trends and action that BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Rob, we're starting with you again because this is, a topic right up your alley. You cover the Seattle Seahawks, and they had a blockbuster trade. I was out at lunch, and I'm not even in my phone, but I look at the TV. I just happen to glance up, and I see Russell Wilson. I'm like, okay, what are they talking about with the Seahawks? He traded. Oh my goodness! So I look at my phone. I'm just like, the boogeyman. He's out of the NFC West. This is a guy who has tortured the 49ers fan base for years, really for a decade. He's just been that knife in their back every single time. I think they've only beat him like 2 times, 3 times in 10 years, just something crazy like that. So he's gone. And the biggest thing I think from all of that was the Seahawks, they received 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. And also Shelby Harris, who a lot of people are kind of overlooking that aspect. Shelby Harris, he's a legit starting defensive tackle. And then also Drew Lock. But what I want to ask you, Rob, aside from, everyone knows Russell Wilson, he's shipped off. What do the Seahawks plan to do with all of those draft picks?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that they did receive a number of draft picks, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. Not only Shelby Harris, good football player, as you just mentioned, Crock. Drew Lock, a quarterback who, hey, just my opinion, I would rank Drew Lock as actually the #1 quarterback in this draft class if he was available in 2022. And that's that's hindsight. I mean, we're looking at this now, and Drew Lock has not made the improvements over the last couple of years in the NFL that the Denver Broncos certainly expected when they made him a second-round selection. But in terms of arm strength, in terms of experience against elite competition, a strong performance at the Senior Bowl when he was there a couple of years ago, I think that Seattle feels pretty good that they have a good young quarterback that they brought in. Now, is he Russell Wilson? Of course not. I mean, you're talking about a multiple Pro Bowl player, quite possibly a future Hall of Famer. Obviously, the quarterback that led Seattle to their only Super Bowl victory to this point. So yeah, he is an absolute legend in Seattle, and kudos to the Denver Broncos. That's a quarterback that might just be able to put him over the top the way that Matthew Stafford did for the Los Angeles Rams. But from a Seattle perspective, you're talking about a team that has not had a top first-round pick in a long, long time. Now they're sitting there at number 9 overall. They naturally had number 41 overall. They just got from a Denver Broncos number 40. So they have 3 of the first 42 picks in a 2022 NFL draft class that I think is better than a lot of people have kind of been, have been describing it in recently. I don't think that it has high-end talent at the quarterback position. I would be stunned if Seattle decides to use that number 9 overall selection on a quarterback. I don't see a Trey Lance. I don't see a Trevor Lawrence. I don't see a Justin Fields. Frankly, I don't see a Mac Jones in this quarterback class. I see a lot of guys who are raw or are basically already capped out. I think that Seattle is going to do exactly what they did in 2012 when they selected Russell Wilson 75th overall. I expect them to use either one of those second-round picks or a third-round selection on one of the quarterbacks that falls into their lap. To me, those are the guys like Desmond Ridder or Sam Howell. that make a little bit more sense in terms of their pro-style offensive quarterbacks who have won, rather than guys who have the elite arm strength, elite athleticism. To me, that is what I expect Seattle to do with the fact that they got all those draft picks. And then you didn't mention Noah Fant. Noah Fant, that's
That's
because
right.
you're the You're the San Francisco 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs. You gentlemen know elite tight end. Seattle hasn't had an elite tight end. I mean, Jimmy Graham was okay, but there's a lot of people in Seattle who are pretty excited about Noah Fant and what he might be able to do when you complement him with the receiver talent that they have with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside. So, Russell Wilson, I think, put Seattle in a better position to win a Super Bowl next year. Sure. But at the same time, all reports is that Russell Wilson basically was forcing his way out. He specifically said he wanted to be traded to the Denver Broncos. Considering if that is true, considering what Seattle was able to get in return for him, I think Seahawks fans have to have at least a little bit more confidence that they might be able to kind of hit the ground running a little bit in 2022.
So what you're telling me is with either 41, 42, or they have 73 now, right? So Bailey Zappi, welcome to Seattle. Go to Salty's, check out Dick's some night. Like, you'll have a good time. It's where the Swats hang out. I am very excited for a second or third round draft pick to show up there. My concern for them is that they're going to see, what did Russ do for us that was so special? He's a smaller guy, a lot of concern when he came out, right? How could he see over the lineman, et cetera, et cetera. So he used his legs. He got away. He broke the pocket. He did what he did. He was an athlete as well. I have a fear that there's too easy a way to artificially elevate somebody like Malik Willis, who can do some of the same things, that you can see some of the offense carry over. I hope that they don't fall into that trap, because I don't think there's a top 10 quarterback in this class. But could you see them, if there was one, who would you peg would be the direction they would want to move forward in?
Well, I think that's exactly what you just said, is that they could talk themselves into the fact that, I mean, my goodness, Malik Willis is an athlete and he has got an absolute cannon. And so if they believe that he could be that guy, that he could be special, then yeah, I think that they could talk themselves into number 9 overall. I agree with you 100%, Ryan. I just don't see a quarterback who's not only not worth a top 10 selection, I don't see what's worth the top 15, maybe even top 20. Malik Willis to me is the quarterback who has the highest upside, but I think he is at least a year away. And I don't know that Drew Lock or Geno Smith, or Jacob Eason, the quarterbacks who are currently with Seattle, is really that guy that needs to be the kind of the mentor for a young quarterback like a Malik Willis. Kenny Pickett, as we can have some other conversation at some point, I think that the quarterback's hand size issue is legitimate with Kenny Pickett. We were all there in Mobile. We saw how bad the weather was.
Yeah.
You may have noticed when Kenny Pickett was dropping the snaps from center, the way he sprayed the ball all over the field on that Tuesday and Wednesday practices. He was not very impressive when the weather got nasty. And I don't know if this is a news flash for you, gentlemen, but it rains in Seattle. And so that's got to be a concern there, So to me, again, I think that you have to eliminate those two quarterbacks from the conversation. Now, Matt Corral, on the other hand, I am intrigued by him, but to me, he's Drew Lock all over again. If you want to go with the gunslinger, then you just draft it or you just trade it for one of them. Why not go with the guy who already has 25 career starts in the NFL? Rather than a guy in Corral who, is, again, he's my top-rated quarterback in this class. To me, he is the best combination of upside and also has gone up against elite competition. And I didn't see him struggle in the Senior Bowl. And so that's, to me, is one of the things there that is a concern. But at the same time, the two quarterbacks I mentioned before, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, I think you can flip-flop in whatever direction that you want. I think that they have not only the arm strength, the mobility, but also just the football mind, the football heart that John Schneider and Pete Carroll have prioritized in the past. So that, to me, is the direction I expect them to go on day 2 rather than on day 1.
Now, let's say they don't go the route of the draft and they want to trade for a player. If everything goes well with Deshaun Watson, could you see maybe Seattle moving the picks for Deshaun Watson to get him over in the NFC West?
I do. And I think that I love that you just mentioned that because I think that that is going to be the direction that they are absolutely going to explore. It makes a lot of sense in terms of the dual threat talent that he is. And let's face it, I mean, if we just throw out all the legal ramifications and all that kind of stuff and just look at it from a football perspective, the way that the three of us, are trained and have those conversations. Deshaun Watson is a superstar. I mean, he's proved that when he beat Alabama to win a national championship all those years ago. And certainly in his first 4 years in the NFL, Pete Carroll at 70 years old, you know that he doesn't want to start all over again with some rookie, you know. But at the same time, I think one of the factors that we have to address is the fact that the Seattle Seahawks are now owned by Jody Allen, a woman, and that is a significant factor considering the charges that have been brought up against Deshaun Watson. There are going to be a lot of men out there who are going to be a little bit more willing to kind of overlook these charges against Deshaun Watson. I'm not so sure that Jody Allen is. Now, maybe she is. Maybe she trusts Pete Carroll and John Schneider and their security team to be able to accurately, see who Deshaun Watson is, the player, the man that I think that he is, what he demonstrated at Clemson, what he demonstrated at Houston. But these are ugly charges. And so I think that that's something that Seattle has to consider. I think that John Schneider and Pete Carroll are interested in Deshaun Watson. My co-host, Corbin Smith, Locked On Seahawks, is reporting that Seattle has shown interest in Deshaun Watson. But at the same time, if Jody Allen says no, then the team owner says no. So I think that this is a storyline that bears watching very, very closely over the next couple of days, because just Friday, in a couple of days here, we are going to see what criminal charges might be processed against Deshaun Watson, and that is of course going to be huge on not only in Seattle but teams like Philadelphia. I still think that Miami is in this conversation. Pittsburgh. There's a number of teams out there. Indianapolis Colts might be right at this point, considering the fact that they just traded Carson Wentz. There's a number of teams out there who recognize that Deshaun Watson, at least on the field, is a difference maker.
Well, you talked a little bit about the Colts and the draft or the trade that they made. So we're going to talk about that and some of the picks that they got. What should they do with those? The second round pick, couple third round picks. Should they go quarterback? We'll talk about that and much more when we return. Big trade that just happened on Wednesday. And, I was in the kitchen making French toast for my wife. I'm always doing something with food, I guess, when these trades go down. But the Indianapolis Colts, they trade Carson Wentz. First, before we even get into the draft aspect of this, why does he keep getting traded? Like, I feel like this is a guy who has a lot of talent. He probably could have played better, especially the last couple of games between the Raiders and Jaguars games. Those were bad losses. But overall, you can do a lot worse than Carson Wentz at quarterback. So why do y'all think that they keep moving off from him?
Inside that organization has to have some kind of reaction, none that I'm willing to share at this point. But I know it's not all flowers and roses in there, okay? And that, I think, comes as part of the simple fact that if you look back over the last few seasons that he's actually played, there's an argument to be made whether he actually lifted his teammates or brought them down. And your quarterback has to be a guy that pushes everybody else on that offense in particular, but the team as a whole to a better level, to a higher level. And I think that's really what it comes down to. You can be okay. You can be a game manager. I know it's got a negative connotation out there in the world, but game managers win games too. And that's what it's about. If you can't get that done, if you fail against a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, when you were supposed to be a double-digit favorite, that's an issue. And you are the guy at the tip of the spear. And sometimes that has to get changed out.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I mean, again, I'm looking at this from a Seattle Seahawks perspective, but the Seahawks played against Carson Wentz when he was in Philadelphia a couple of years ago. They played against Carson Wentz at the Indianapolis Colts in their season opener this past year. And frankly, the Colts and the Eagles in both games were better teams than the Seahawks. And Seattle actually won both of those contests. If the quarterback play on the opposite field would have been better, then Seattle should have walked out of there with 2 losses. But Carson Wentz dropped the ball literally and figuratively in both games. And so I think that's what the conversation that we're having now. And that's the thing is that you can make the argument that Seattle has to draft a quarterback. Certainly, there's a lot of fans in Seattle that argue that they have to take a quarterback, but they have a quarterback that they just drafted in Drew Lock, who has 25 starts at the NFL level. Um, the Indianapolis Colts right now, they got Sam Ehlinger and James Morgan. I'm sorry, and James Morgan is actually a guy at FIU that I'm intrigued by. And I mean, Crock, you're gonna know him better than I am with a former San Francisco guy, but at the same time, not a guy, either one of them, who has any iota of NFL experience. So I think that is the team in the Indianapolis Colts, and we got to be having a conversation about is what are they going to do at the quarterback position. I think that they are one of the teams that, as I mentioned before with Deshaun Watson, they're going to know Deshaun Watson very, very well playing up against him in the AFC. They, to me, are a team that's built to win right now. When you consider some of the talent that they have, and DeForest Buckner and Jonathan Taylor, of course, I mean, that's a club that is looking to win. So what kind of big move are they going to make? And again, going back to your initial point, Eric, I mean, with the quarterback there, I just think that the fact that he has struggled as much as he has, he struggled in durability in North Dakota State as well. I mean, it is an issue for him. And hey, I think it's interesting that he's going to Washington. I think that is a team that has the defensive talent that might be able to do something there. But still, the fact that you have two different teams that have invested as much as they have, and publicly have invested as much as they have on Carson Wentz, and he still struggled as much as they have. To me, that is one of the real storylines that has been a little bit forgotten because everybody's focusing on Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. And I think that the Colts, frankly, are a better team in a lot of ways than the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks. And so to me, that is a storyline that needs to be talked about a little bit more.
Do you think that there's any chance that the Houston Texans say, you know what? Yeah, we're both in the AFC South, but let's go ahead and trade the Indianapolis Colts, Deshaun Watson?
I have a hard time believing that they would, but we've seen 3-team kind of parlay kind of moves. I mean, that to me is we're living in a different world now, guys. I mean, I do believe that that's part of the reason why Seattle wound up trading Russell Wilson to AFC is I think that they were just adamant that they were not going to trade him to another team in the NFC. But the Houston Texans are in a whole different realm of what's going on right now. I mean, they had a quarterback who was not under criminal, he was being investigated, but he wasn't in jail. The NFL had not suspended him. He opted to sit out, he and the Texans, this past season. So if they can get draft picks for him, I don't think that they want to trade him to a divisional rival. That's crazy talk. But at the same time, it does happen. So I'd be surprised to see Deshaun Watson in Indianapolis Colts uniform. But I do believe that they are a team that is going to find somebody that has to play. And right now, there's Deshaun Watson in terms from its pure talent level. There's Deshaun Watson, then there's everybody else. I mean, otherwise they can go with Mitch Trubisky, they can go with Jameis Winston. I mean, the drop off in talent is significant. Are they going to make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo? To me, that is one of the guys who I think does make some sense for the Indianapolis Colts, just considering the fact that they do have the defense, they do have the running game that might be able to support a quarterback like Garoppolo.
Now, let's say they potentially want to go the draft route. All right, at pick 42 or 73, do y'all think that maybe there's a potential quarterback that they could be eyeing in that range?
I'll tell you this. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Schneider, for depositing Russ in the AFC West. Really appreciate that. Secondly, I agree. I will say this. I think if there's a organization in this league that might say, hey, we just want Deshaun out of here, we're not going to play by the normal rules, it might be the Houston organization that kind of throws that out the window. But I also think the Garoppolo is a good fit. And I do think that if none of that works out, I do think Chris Ballard is one of the GMs that values the fifth-year option if he does have to draft somebody. So I can see a package of 42 and one of the other picks to go up to 32, 31, something like that. So if he has to take a quarterback, I don't think it's at 42. I think he gets back into the first round to get that fifth year.
That's an excellent point. And I think that, again, we're having a conversation about number 42 overall selection. And as we mentioned, a couple of moments ago, Seattle has the 40th and 41st. Back-to-back selections. and right before. So that's why I would be surprised if the Indianapolis Colts are able to sit at number 42 overall and still be able to get the quarterback that they want. There's a possibility that there's two quarterbacks to go back to back there. I'd be surprised if Seattle does not take a quarterback at 40 or 41 or number 9, if that's what they do, and they don't get a veteran in some way like a Deshaun Watson. But at the same time, just knowing how much that Chris Ballard, general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, one of his top scouts, Ed Dodds, who used to be with the Seattle Seahawks under John Schneider, they're going to know each other very well. They've done multiple trades in the past couple of years together. They know those two franchises extremely well. I'd be surprised if one team, Seattle, obviously currently drafting earlier, passed on quarterbacks, and then the Indianapolis Colts took one at 42. To me, that is one of the fun things about this draft class is that, again, I don't think that the quarterback talent at the top end is quite as good, but everybody wants to compare this to the 2013 draft class that had a lot of quarterbacks who struggled. But 2012, we saw guys like Andrew Luck, obviously, and Robert Griffin III go number 1 and number 2. But it was the quarterbacks, Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins, who wound up going later that had a lot of success. That, to me, is what this quarterback class reminds me of. I think that some of the quarterbacks who are going to get selected in round 2 and round 3 are going to wind up having more success long-term in the NFL than some of the quarterbacks who wind up getting drafted early.
Man, this is going to be a lot of stuff to keep an eye on, especially over the next few days heading into the NFL free agency. I know I'll be keeping my eyes open to see what the 49ers do with Jimmy Garoppolo. Can they move him to Indianapolis, or will Indianapolis opt to maybe go the draft route, pick 42, pick 73? Could a quarterback be there that they potentially like after watching all these pro days? But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On NFL Draft. I want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. As always, got my guy Ryan Tracy with us from Rogue Analytics. We got Rob Range from Fox Sports. We want to thank you for listening in, and that's going to be it. We are out. Peace.